Many children appear financially responsible, but the real test is what they do when parents aren't around. Because something interesting happens. A child who behaves perfectly at the supermarket might actually spend impulsively the moment they walk into a convenience store after school. So the real question is not, does my child know how to use money? The real question is this: is my child financially mature, or are they financially supervised? Today, I want to show you a simple framework called the money maturity ladder because it reveals the difference between children who merely follow instructions and children who actually understand money. And this matters more than many parents realize because when children are young, it is very easy for behavior to look good. On the surface, they listen, they follow instructions, they stay within budget. Sometimes, they do as they're told. And as parents, we naturally feel encouraged by that. I know I do. We think, good, my child is learning how to handle money well. But here is the deeper question: is that behavior coming from the child's own understanding, or is it only happening because the adult, you, me, are present? That is very different. If a child suddenly had complete freedom with money tomorrow, what do you think will happen? Would they pause to think? Will they compare choices? Would they consider whether something is a need or a want? Or would they spend first and think later? Because financial maturity only happens and only appears when supervision disappears. You are not there. Over the years, working with parents and children, I have noticed something very consistent. Many parents tell me, my child is quite responsible with money. And often, that is true, but only when the parent is present. Guess what? When the parents are around, children behave responsibly. They can buy the groceries within the fixed budget that we hopefully give them when they're with us at the supermarket. They can also help to purchase food. They can also follow the list that we give them. I know that I do that with my children. They can carry out the instructions quite well. And when you watch that happens, it comes off as maturity. But sometimes what we are actually seeing could be obedience. The parent is deciding, the child is merely executing, and those two things are not the same. You might see this pretty clearly around schools in Singapore, where I'm from, or wherever you are. When parents are around, children behave responsibly, but after school, when the parents are no longer around because we're all busy working, they walk into the convenience stores, they buy Slurpees, sweets, snacks, and they happen to spend more freely. And this difference becomes pretty obvious. The restraint, when the parent was there, is no longer present. The decision changes because the parent is no longer there. So the question then becomes this: is the child making the decision or simply following the parent's instructions? Because behavior under supervision is not the same as maturity. And this is where our framework comes in pretty useful. I call it the money maturity ladder. Different levels for different things. Maturity develops at different stages. It doesn't appear automatically just when a child grows older. It doesn't just appear because a child can count money, and it definitely doesn't appear just because a child can follow instructions. It develops layer by layer. 5 stages: discernment, discipline, decision judgment, resource stewardship, and financial character. These 5 stages help us see whether money understanding is internalized or whether it is being enforced externally from the outside. And when children climb this ladder, money stops controlling them. They begin controlling money. They are the masters of money. And the difference becomes visible when children makes this decision alone without parents. Here's a very simple way parents can test this. Give a child $10. I spoke about it last week, and observe what happens. That is it. There is no need to complicate things. Give a child a small amount of money and watch their decision. In Singapore, one very ordinary example is this. A child finishes school, walks past a convenience store and decides whether to buy snacks after school. That moment tells you a lot. Not because the purchase itself is huge, and most of the time they are pretty small in quantity and number, but because the thinking behind the purchase reveals something even deeper. Then, after the purchase, ask 4 questions. Why do you buy this? Was it a need or a want? What value did you get out of it? Did you consider any alternatives? These questions are really powerful because now you're not just observing the action, you are examining the thinking. Can your child explain the decision, or can they only explain the action? That decision matters because explanation reveals maturity. And if this kind of content helps you think more clearly about your child's money habits, do like this video, subscribe, and leave your questions in the comments below. I will reply to the comments that I see. Many parents are dealing with the same thing, even though it looks slightly different in each family. Let's go deeper into the ladder. Financial maturity begins with a very simple skill, knowing the difference between a need and the want. This is the first stage. Discernment. It does sound basic, but many children are still blurry on this. A meal during recess might appear to be a need. An extra snack or a drink or sweets, just because it looks nice, usually is a want. And the point is not that wants are evil. That isn't the issue. The question is whether the child understands the difference between the two, needs and wants. For example, a child buys sweets after school. The issue is not just the sweets. The real issue is whether or not the child understands what kind of decision that was. Was it a need? No. Was it a want? Quite likely, yes. You might think, but it's just a small snack, and that is true. But small purchases reveal big patterns. And if a child cannot identify whether a want, when it is small, is a want, it becomes harder to make wise decisions when the amounts become bigger in life later. And they do get very big in the future. So one very practical thing a parent can simply ask was, is that a want or a need? And then wait for the child to answer. Can your child articulate and answer that clearly? Because discernment is the first step to maturity. The second step is discipline, the ability to resist impulse. This is where many children struggle with, not just them, but adults too. Because when they know something is a want, they still want it immediately, and that is pretty normal. Children naturally lean towards instant gratification. They see it, they want it, they buy it. But discipline is the ability to pause, to hold back, to say, I don't need this right now. This becomes especially obvious when children receive pocket money for the first time. Sometimes a child who has never had to control money suddenly gets a lot of freedom in their first time in school where they have money to use. And what happens? They spend everything immediately, not because they are bad children, not because they are hopeless, but it's because they never had to practice control before. They had supervision before. Now they have freedom. And when there is freedom without preparation, it often turns into impulsive spending. Some parents think they will mature, they will grow later, they will learn it later, but later can possibly be very expensive. Better a $5 mistake now than a $500, $5,000, $50,000 mistake later on. That is why small mistakes are useful at a young age, because a child spends too quickly and has nothing left later has to bear that consequence. And that consequence teaches something supervision can never replace. Discipline grows through experience. The third stage is decision judgment, the ability to evaluate options before spending. This is where children move beyond pure impulse and start to think carefully. What are my available choices? Is there a better option? Is this worth the price? Could I wait? Could I buy something else instead? I remember a case where a child spent every cent at the school, my son. Not because anything there was necessary, but because that child, my son, suddenly had the freedom to choose. And once that freedom appeared, everything in front of him became very tempting. The spending was not really about the items, it was about the thrill of having complete autonomy and power over money for the first time. Now, many parents react to this by tightening control even more. I have fallen into that trap. They think, okay, since my child made a poor choice, I must now take control over everything. But that does not build judgment, it only restores supervision. A better response is to guide the thinking. Ask, what other choices were available? What made this seem worth buying? If you were given a chance again, would you make the same choice? This helps the child reflect, and that reflection strengthens judgment because judgment improves through reflection. The fourth stage is resource stewardship, learning that money must last, and this is a big one because many children think about money only in the present. Yes, I have money now, so I can spend it now. But when stewardship teaches a child to think further, how long do I want this money to last me? Do I want to use all this money today? What happens tomorrow if I spend everything now? Can I save a part of it? Can I delay this purchase to a later point in time? This is where patience begins to form. And parents can help by asking very simple question. How long do you want this money to last? That one question alone can change the child's thinking. Because now the decision is no longer about the item, it becomes about time. It becomes about planning. It becomes about preserving a resource, that resource, some resources. Short term pleasure or long term usefulness. That is the tension. And when children learn to sit inside that tension and make a thoughtful choice, stewardship begins to grow. Stewardship builds patience. The fifth stage is financial character, and this is where money maturity becomes deeper than just spending habits. Because money is not only about buying, about purchasing, it is also about the values that holds dear to every person. Does your child only think about spending, or do they also think about saving and sharing? And this is difficult to mature. Do they show gratitude? Do they think beyond themselves? Do they understand that money can be used wisely, not just for personal enjoyment, but also in consideration for others? A child with financial character does not simply ask, what can I get? They also begin to ask, what should I do with what I have? That's a very different mindset. And it matters because character is what holds the whole ladder together. A child can be clever. A child can be disciplined in certain moments. But when character develops, money begins to sit in the right place. As a tool, not as a master. Character completes maturity. So let's bring this all together. Financial maturity is not revealed when parents are watching. It is revealed when children make decisions alone. That is when their true nature comes out. Discernment, discipline, judgment, stewardship, character. These are not just ideas, they are signs. They reveal whether your child is merely following instructions or whether your child is actually learning to master money. So, what can you do this week? First, give a child a small amount of money regularly. Not a huge amount, just enough for practice, because practice builds judgment. Second, allow small mistakes and allow them to own that mistake. Don't rescue every poor decision immediately, because these mistakes teach consequences, and children need to feel some of these consequences while the stakes are still pretty small. Third, discuss decisions. After they spend, ask questions. Why did you buy that? Was it a need or a want? What value did you get? Have you considered another option? Because reflection builds maturity. And this is where many parents miss the opportunity. They focus only on the purchase, but the real goal is in the conversation after the purchase. This is where the child learns to think. That is where the child learns to explain. That is where internal maturity starts to form. If you want to understand how maturity If you want to understand how financial maturity develops step by step, watch the video somewhere up there where I explain the money maturity ladder in detail. Because once parents understand the ladder, they stop supervising and start teaching children to master money. And before you move on, I want to leave you with one simple question. If a child made a purchase today, could they clearly explain why they made that decision? Because if they can't explain that reasoning, your child may still be financially supervised rather than financially mature. See you guys in the next one. Take care.